You're listening to the Tony Kinnett Cast on 93 WIBC.
CYTV
Here on the Daily Signal.
Good evening and welcome to the Tony Kinnett Cast here on the Daily Signal, nationally syndicated first on 93 WIBC. There's quite a bit that occurred over the weekend. When I mean quite a bit, I mean that there was announcement after crazy thing that happened, after insane thing that happened, after bad decision, after good decision. And so we're going to break down as much of it as possible in this episode. Now, you might be out there and be saying, hey, now, if you don't reach the exactly what I want you to cover here before the end of the episode today, does that mean you don't care about it? That you're a stooge, that you're bought out by financial interest group, that you're licking the boots of X, Y, and Z? No, it doesn't mean that at all. It means that you'll have to catch tomorrow's show as well so that, you can get everything, because I'm not going to keep you here all night. That said, there is a monumental event which has occurred. We found it. It's actually a really massive breakthrough. We contacted the Smithsonian. We contacted Ripley's Believe It or Not. We contacted, the Guinness Book of World Records. Also, your local librarian, to let them know that one of the most crucial things in history has occurred. The left has finally found a group of refugees that they despise. After saying that, quoting the Statue of Liberty, you're tired, you're poor, you're huddled masses yearning to breathe free. After lectures about how you hated refugees and how only they were truly moral and wonderful, because after all, they think that the United States should be shared with any oppressed group out there at all. They finally found out that that only applies to people whose skin tones are appropriately dark enough. By the way, we've seen this before. We've seen the New York Times and other groups complain that certain refugee groups into the country were a little too Christian, that perhaps certain Hispanic individuals that were being allowed to stay were a little too white. They were the wrong kind. They're Cuban. See, they're white Hispanic. It's not the same. That doesn't mean they're Hispanic. They're not the right shade of brown, dang it. That's what the left had lost their mind over. Well, it's happened again. Because the South African government, and I do mean the government, not just a group in the country, the South African government has announced through various ways and means and appointed certain individuals to power and pardoned certain individuals in their court system in order to go after Dutch descendant white people in South Africa, and really any white person in general. In fact, there are stories coming out of South Africa of people who just look white, just being attacked. Why? Well, because apartheid in the 90s, and even though a lot of the people who were being attacked weren't even alive during apartheid, much less have anything to do with it, apparently that's totally okay. The chief slaughterer of people over in South Africa, by the way, not just white people, but people who are black and are various shades of brown from all kinds of countries around the world, introduced Julius Sello Malema, the commander-in-chief of economic freedom fighters and a revolutionary activist for radical change in Africa. So like every discount communist, he's got this little red beret on and he's going to get all fancy. And the things he has to say are just peachy.
The mayor of DA in PE is a white man. So these people, when you want to hit them hard, go after a white man. They feel a terrible pain because you have touched a white man. Not because Mashaba and Soli will not be touched. They will be touched, don't worry. But we are starting with this whiteness. We are cutting the throat of whiteness.
Okay, so in South Africa, it's totally fine, no problems whatsoever. Hey, don't worry about it. If you feel as though you don't like white people, the left has made all of the excuses for them. They said, well, it's a very complex situation. There's a lot of deep and serious pain. And, hey, that's just colonialism had its effects and blah, 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 blah. Again, the guy's openly saying that it's just this group of people, this color. Not individuals who have done these specific actions, just white people are bad. Or black people are bad. Brown people are bad. Asian people are bad, whatever. And this kind of nonsense seeps into the South African judicial regime as well.
I'm willing to condemn murder, more than willing, but not of white people.
Oh.
I'm not going to play in the hands of white supremacists.
This is a guy who thinks that if you condemn the murder of a white person, then you're playing into the hands of white supremacists and acts of violence against people in South Africa who happen to be white are increasing at a commensurate rate. And by the way, all around the world, there are acts of violence that are committed against all kinds of people, all different colors. And the Trump administration, unlike the Biden administration, who threw open the door for anyone who said they were coming from a country where they were persecuted, even if, they had a history of affiliation with MS-13, like every Maryland father. The Biden administration threw open the doors, but the Trump administration has reached out to a few particular groups of people, like the United States has done historically throughout its history, has reached out to current active acts of persecution happening in countries. The United States has said this group of people, for example, in Germany or in France or in South Africa or in Central America, in one of these Central American or South American countries, this is a group currently being targeted. So members of this targeted group may come to the United States, especially if they are willing to assimilate. And so 54 Dutch descendant farmers made the jump over to the United States. And it's not, again, as many comments have pointed out, it's not military-aged single men like a lot of migrants over. It's just families holding American flags, not a flag of the country they just came from, but a flag of the United States. And a lot of people are, really happy with that. And the left has decided that this is the true marker of Trump's evil, of his racism, because there's a little girl waving an American flag. Ah, the horror. Here's MSNBC's Donna Edwards chewing on her own elbows.
Well, in my view, what makes it different is that they are white South Africans. The president, in my view, has not hidden his racism behind a bushel. In fact, in his policies, whether it's removing government workers or, in this case, admitting white South Africans while denying refugee status, asylum seekers from other countries, principally Central and South American and Black nations, to come into this country. And so I think that, this policy, while it's not surprising in this action, really speaks of the underlying message in this that disrespects and shows disdain for people of color while embracing these Afrikaners now, and also expediting the process by which they can come into the country while denying that same process to other refugees.
Again, the hilarious thing out of this entire interview, this rant that she went on, is suggesting that the Trump administration is opening up illegal immigration for white people. In the countries that the Trump administration is allowing refugee relocation from, there are two things going on. Number one, there is active persecution against a minority group from the government. That is not happening in Venezuela. That is not happening in El Salvador or from Belize to Argentina. It's not happening in South America and Central America. It is happening in places like the United Kingdom and in places like South Africa, where a minority group is being targeted by the majority for perceived systemic ills. It has nothing to do, he's always banning refugees from Black countries. First of all, no. And number two, banning dudes in their 20s from coming into the country after coming through the border illegally and then saying, oh, I can't go back home because this gang I'm totally not affiliated with will kill me. Yeah, not the same thing at all. It's just not. And the American people do, in fact, realize this. But alas, now that these people are here, the press is going to kick up a storm. Here's the President of the United States making this clarification after a question from a journalist today.
I want to ask you about South African refugees. Dozens of Afrikaners who claim discrimination in their home country are heading to the United States, right, where your administration is going to welcome them as refugees. Now, this comes as you've halted virtually all refugee admissions for people fleeing famine and war from countries like Sudan and the Democratic Republic of Congo. Why are you creating an expedited path into the country for Afrikaners but not others?
Because they're being killed. And We don't want to see people be killed. Now, South Africa leadership is coming to see me, I understand, sometime next week. And, we're supposed to have I guess a G20 meeting there or something. But we're having a G20 meeting. I don't know how we can go unless that situation's taken care of. But it's a genocide that's taking place that you people don't want to write about. But it's a terrible thing that's taking place. And farmers are being killed. They happen to be white. But whether they're white or black makes no difference to me. But white farmers are being brutally killed, and their land is being confiscated in South Africa. And the newspapers and the media, television media, doesn't even talk about it. If it were the other way around, they'd talk about it. That would be the only story they'd talk about. And I don't care who they are. I don't care about their race, their color. I don't care about their height, their weight. I don't care about anything. I just know that what's happening is terrible. I have people that live in South Africa. They say it's a terrible situation taking place. So we've essentially extended citizenship to those people to escape from that violence and come here.
All right. So this is a very important point that the Trump team has made. Again, that it is a government action against a minority group in the country who is just confiscating the land for perceived ills. And the media cannot stand this. And not only can the media not stand this, but all of the left-wing activists who told us that there's nothing more important than refugees and immigrants, nothing more important at all, no matter who they are, no matter where they come from. You may remember on Inauguration Day of Trump's second administration, Marianne Edgar Budd from the Episcopalian Church, which has the doctrine of a glass of tepid water, gave this sort of sermon lecture to Trump and Vance and others, just reaming the president left and right about begging for mercy, please, Mr. President.
Let me make one final plea, Mr. President. Millions have put their trust in you. And as you told the nation yesterday, you have felt the providential hand of a loving God. In the name of our God, I ask you to have mercy upon the people in our country who are scared now. There are gay, lesbian, and transgender children in Democratic, Republican, and independent families, some who fear for their lives. And the people who pick our crops.
There it is.
And clean our office buildings, who labor in poultry farms and meat packing plants.
Mr. President, please have mercy on the slave labor, Mr. President. Please, the crop pickers, those brown people, Mr. President, please. Again, the way that the left activists treat illegal immigrants and people who seek migrant status in this country is hilarious. As though the only reason that they are worth keeping in the country is because they are crop pickers and office cleaners and poultry farm workers, which, oh dear God, what a horrible thing to say. Another classic argument from the South in the 1850s and 60s was, well, if we free our slaves, who's going to pick the cotton? So the lovely Episcopalian minister, I use that term as loosely as is humanly possible, Marianne Edgar Budd, well, her Episcopalian church, wouldn't you just know, has announced that they will no longer be working with the U.S. government to help settle refugees in the United States. And crazily enough, in the letter, they overtly state it's because some of the refugees they might be resettling happen to be white. Wow. So here we go. Quote, since January, the previously bipartisan U.S. refugee admissions program, they always say that whenever they want to try to paint some organization as this magical entity that's above all scorn, in which we participate, has essentially shut down. Virtually no new refugees have arrived. Hundreds of staff and resettlement agencies around the country have been laid off, and funding for resettling refugees who have already arrived has been uncertain. Then, just over 2 weeks ago, the federal government informed Episcopal Migration Ministries that under the terms of our federal grant, we are expected to resettle white Afrikaners from South Africa, whom the U.S. government has classified as refugees. Oh, the horror! This isn't the skin tone I was promised. Quote, in light of our church's steadfast commitment to racial justice and reconciliation and our historic ties with the Anglican Church of Southern Africa, we are not able to take this step. Okay. Fantastic. So again, if the migrants are the right color, then, oh, well, that's the end of the world. You got to resettle them right now. I mean, who cares if he's an MS-13 wife beater who endangered his children and trafficked individuals? I mean, who cares if it's, the numerous violent cases of murderers and rapists and abusers? Oh, they're brown, so it's really complex. You got to hang on a second. But the minute that it's, well, this family had their farm stripped away from them. Okay, why? What's the context? Well, the group that seized them and sexually abused the teenage women on the farm when they took the farm away said that it was because they were white. Oh, well, is it because, they had apartheid ties from the 90s? No. The crowd is very open about it. They're like, oh, yeah, they're white. So, They took the land because they believed that white people shouldn't be allowed to own land in South Africa. And all of a sudden, the left's like, well, you can't just take those people in. I mean, goodness, their skin's not dark enough. They might have to wear sunscreen. The horror. Okay. By the way, the rest of the Western world is taking one of two approaches. You have Emmanuel Macron, who's busy welcoming every Islamic migrant into the country that he can, up to and including welcoming and in official state visits and greetings, known, open, proud Islamic terrorists. And I mean the guy who's on video decapitating men, women, children. Totally fine for Macron. Keir Starmer, however, has perhaps finally realized that maybe that approach isn't exactly a good idea anymore. Prime Minister of the UK.
These rules become even more important. Without them, we risk becoming an island of strangers, not a nation that walks forward together. So when you have an immigration system that seems almost designed to permit abuse, that encourages some businesses to bring in lower paid workers rather than invest in our young people, or simply one that is sold by politicians to the British people on an entirely false premise, then you're not championing growth, you're not championing justice, or however else people defend the status quo. You're actually contributing to the forces that are slowly pulling our country apart. So yes, I believe in this. I believe we need to reduce immigration significantly.
Oh. Because here's the real point about immigration. Again, those of you out there that are tuning in via radio or via live stream, whatever it is, you don't need me to tell you why unfettered immigration is bad. You understand that the reason immigration either makes or breaks the culture of your country is all due to one magical word: assimilation. Assimilation. When the Ellis Island immigration services were open and people came to ports of entry to enter the United States, they were expected to conjoin to the American way of life. They were expected to learn the culture, to participate in its trade, and to become Americans. They were leaving their old country behind. Now, to bring their culture as well. Excellent, important, obviously. But they are to assimilate into the United States, to American culture, and support her over everything else. That's not too much to ask. The problem is when you bring people into the country who then wall off neighborhoods to create little Sharia law havens, or who wall off neighborhoods to create little cartel paradises, and say, well, it's really complex. Look at the color of their skin. Look at how complex that is. No. Absolutely not. And by the way, this point was made most clearly over the last couple of decades by, you guessed it, some of the presidencies in Africa, who pointed out that assimilation into a country's moral culture, compass, and general drive is the most important facet, because otherwise, why would they want you there? It doesn't matter what color you are. What are you going to do once you get here? For the left, all that matters is if you pick the crops and you clean the offices and you do the lower work. But there's far more to building a civilization than whether or not there's somebody in the fields. We're going to be back in a second with Jason Riley to talk about some kind of racial issues in the collegiate university side of things in his new book on the Affirmative Action Myth. Don't go anywhere. It's the Tony Kinnett Cast here on the Daily Signal.
The Tony Kinnett Cast on 93 WIBC.
Welcome back to the Tony Kinnett Cast here on the Daily Signal, nationally syndicated first on 93 WIBC. There are a lot of Wall Street Journal columnists. You may not be a Wall Street Journal column reader, but if there's one that you do read, it should be Jason Riley, without a doubt. Not only because he has a way of writing in a familiar sense that also brings really great empirical evidence, as shown, of course, in his new book, The Affirmative Action Myth. Not only is it a good book, because I couldn't put it down, which if you guys know how busy things are right now in the news feed, not putting a book down is a little bit rare, but also because it's such a crucial topic at a crucial time. Jason, thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me, Tony.
So the Affirmative Action Myth, why blacks don't need racial preferences to succeed. It's a pretty powerful book. Obviously, it's going to stir perhaps a couple of pots. Tell us about what it is that threw you into this.
Well, the impetus for the book was the 2023 Supreme Court decision in Students for Fair Admissions v. Harvard, which ended race-based college admissions. And it was a decision that was largely anticipated by people who follow this sort of thing, follow the Supreme Court. Given the court's makeup, people thought the days for affirmative action in higher education were really numbered. But I was struck by the chatter around the decision, and particularly from elites and black elites who, on the left, who kept saying that if the court struck down racial preferences, this would be devastating to black people.
When people debate affirmative action, I always ask them, the why. Why do you think we needed affirmative action? Because people were set back so far that they needed to put laws in place to try to help people catch up and get on a level playing field.
Some of the people I went to school with were far less smart than me or the other black folk there. They got in because their daddy and their granddaddy. I went to school with somebody whose name was on one of the buildings. You're going to school with people whose names are on the buildings, who are third and fourth generation legacies, whose parents pumped money into Harvard to get them in. But that affirmative action is okay with this majority. They said that the people who benefited from slavery, their descendants, who are so far ahead of black folk in terms of opportunity, that will never catch up to them. I don't care how many Oprahs we get.
Work with them and proceed to analyze the very wrong-headed decision that was made by the United States Supreme Court on the question of affirmative action. But I rise today as a clear recipient of affirmative action.
Black people cannot get ahead without racial preferences and affirmative action. That affirmative action created the black middle class, and it will be devastated. It will be decimated if we don't have these policies in place. And I said to myself, wait a minute, that is not the history as I read it when it comes to these preferences. In fact, a black middle class existed in the decades prior to affirmative action and was growing. It was a significant black middle class. And if anything, the growth of the black middle class slowed during the era of affirmative action. And so I wrote the book to sort of counter that sky is falling narrative that we heard around the decision.
When I was in Indianapolis public schools, we had the Crispus Attucks Museum in Indianapolis at one of the high schools. And I remember having a conversation after I had read Black Rednecks and White Liberals by Thomas Sowell, talking a little bit about the beginning of the book. He actually opens up with an example of Indianapolis and how the kind of divisions in the city in the 40s and the 50s were less about black people versus white people and far more about the people who lived in Indianapolis, the black people and the white people, versus what they saw as white trash moving up from the South into Indianapolis. And when I would bring this up, because of course we had to have our 857 racial equity meetings in Indianapolis public schools, that was never taken very well. And I just wanted more context because, I'm kind of a history geek and I love hearing about why certain decisions are made and aren't made. And I ran across the same kind of data in your book here. So you wrote between 1960 and 1972, the number of blacks categorized as, quote, white collar workers, craftsmen, and operatives grew from 2.9 million to 5.1, or by about 75%. The increase comparable among whites during this same decade was only 23%. And you started to talk more and more in this particular section about how before affirmative action became the consistent policy, the rate of black wealth gain generationally, black labor gain, black skill gain was immense. And then as soon as affirmative action hits, and we see this in Indianapolis as well, it almost screeched to a halt.
Mm-hmm. Right. And even before 1960, I think one of the more striking figures is that between 1940 and 1960, the black poverty rate in this country fell from 87% to 47%. So
Would you say that line just one more time again, just because I don't think people understand how insane it is for a poverty rate for an entire demographic group to fall. Would you just one more time on that statistic?
Sure. It fell by 40 percentage points between 1940 and 1960. And what's striking about this is this was, of course, not only before affirmative action or DEI policies. 1960 is before the Civil Rights Act of 1964. It's before the Voting Rights Act of 1965. It's before blacks had any kind of political clout in this country, before mayors were running large cities with large black populations, before there was a huge congressional black caucus in Washington, and of course, well before there was a black president. So again, this poverty reduction is occurring during peak Jim Crow. And the idea that the black middle class we have today, that people want to credit racial preferences or affirmative action policies, when in fact black people largely lifted themselves out of poverty during an era when there was a lot of racial discrimination in this country. It was legal. It was not only legal, but by custom, you also saw a lot of racial discrimination in this country. So again, this is a narrative that many of the elites today have no interest in pursuing and highlighting. If you're an activist out there trying to raise money, you want to pretend it's still 1950 in this country. If you're a politician trying to scare black people to the polls, again, you want to tell them there's a government program out there that can help them, that can do for them, that all their problems are someone else's fault. But this is not the history of black upward mobility in this country. And I think someone needs to make that known and make that more commonly known than it is.
And one of the craziest facets of this nursery of the black communities in this country, the idea that they have to be kept infantile and subsistent so that everyone can continually be a civil rights hero, which is what, at least from my read, is where a lot of this stems from. Everyone wants to be a hero and worshipped. It is beyond disrespectful. So look, again, as you said, at a height of peak adversity, that the driven black communities in this country that were very different from each other, Chicago being different from Atlanta, being different from Nashville and from Memphis, et cetera, the cultural and the economic contributions of those working because no one else was going to do it for them.
Right.
I mean, they fundamentally changed American society. Those as a jazz musician, those cultural impacts fundamentally shaped the touchstone of American culture through the Cold War. And through World War II as well, for that example.
Sure.
You bring this up that from 1960 really forward, the amount of progress on a number of different categories for different black communities in the United States didn't just slow down. I mean, the numbers that you cited were and I can't remember the exact statistic. I think I have it bookmarked over here. Fell to it just felt like it got cut in half. Some of the improvements over decades were like cut in
Sure,
half.
I can give you a couple examples.
Please.
In economics, we mentioned blacks leaving poverty. The blacks were also increasing their years of education, both in absolute terms and relative to white. It's increasing their years of education. But what we were seeing, whether it was educationally or economically, it was a convergence. We saw a reduction in the black-white gaps in everything from home ownership to incomes to educational attainment to blacks entering skilled professions and so forth. For the first 2/3 of the 20th century, that's what we saw. And then, as you mentioned, right around the late 1960s and the early 1970s, right around the onset of affirmative action policies, which I date to the late 60s and early 70s, you see a slowdown or a stalling in this convergence. So, for instance, in some cases, you even see retrogression. So, for instance, blacks' college completion rates were gaining on white college completion rates up until about 1970. And according to Harvard's Robert Putnam, black college completion rates today remain where they were in 1970 after 50-odd years of affirmative action. You saw the same thing happening in terms of black incomes as a percentage of white incomes. The gap was narrowing and narrowing and narrowing throughout the 40s, throughout the 50s, throughout the 1960s, and then you see the stalling in that trend. And one of the reasons you see a stalling in the trend is because of the proliferation of single-parent homes in the black community, starting in the late 1960s. And the income of a single-parent home simply cannot compete with the income of a two-parent home. So once you see this divergence in the makeup of the nuclear family, or the breakdown of the nuclear family in the case of blacks, you begin to see an economic divergence again. And so that's what I mean. Some of the policies were not just stalling. We saw retrogression because as recently as the early 1960s, 2 out of 3 black kids were raised in a home with a mother and a father. Today, more than 70% are not. And in some of our inner cities, it's as high as 80%. That has a direct relationship to economic advancement of blacks. I mean, we know all the data associated with single-parent homes from, drug abuse and involvement with the criminal justice system, dropping out of school, teen pregnancy. But at a very fundamental level, you're not going to see an economic convergence between blacks and whites when the typical makeup of a black family looks this way, or a black household looks this way, and the typical makeup of a white household looks this way. And that's what we started to see in the late 60s and early 70s.
And the proof in this pudding, I think, when you start to bring in kind of mid-20th century larger scale immigration. And this is something that when I was, again, as a science coordinator, talking about why certain demographics were performing better or worse than others. And I hated these conversations because the assumptions just exploded in a conversation like this, was that Hispanic students appeared to be closing the gaps far faster than black students were closing the gap. And the argument that I made is that in Indianapolis, there were far more two-parent households in Hispanic homes that were traditionally Catholic, rather than what we saw in Western Indianapolis black homes, for example. And then mixed students the same way. And of course, all of the varieties that are always left out and ignored because it doesn't necessarily fit the narrative.
You're right about the importance of the nuclear family. You can not only see it in the black-white gap, you can see it in the white-Asian gap.
Correct.
I mean, Asians outperform whites both economically and academically in this country and have for decades. And guess who has the lowest percentage of single-parent homes?
Let me guess. Survey says Asian Americans. Shocker.
So yes, there is a very important correlation there, and the left doesn't like to talk about it. They don't like to talk about how cultural differences make a difference in sort of economic inequality. It's sort of taboo to talk about
come on, Jason, think about it. What was the same movement that popped up at the exact same time as affirmative action? It was the sexual revolution and you don't need to get married and have a family and all of that. It had major implications and made people subsistent on the government.
Exactly. But we need to talk about it. And affirmative action is not going to be able to make up for these cultural differences, this antisocial behavior you see in among a lot of poor Black communities. No, affirmative action is not going to make up for that. Racial preferences are not going to make up for it. We know that. I mean, these policies have been around for more than 50 years now. If they were going to work, they would have worked by now. And it's clear to me that they don't work and that we need to try something different.
I think you're right on the money. Jason Riley really cannot recommend the affirmative action myth enough. And I mean this. You do book interviews on shows all the time. And that's part of the political sphere. You do news shows, you do book reviews. Pick this one up. I am putting it next to my Thomas Sowell books on the shelf. Those of you who read know that's not something one does lightly. Get it? We're going to have it in the description. Jason, thanks again, man.
Thank you. Thank you. Take care.
We'll be back in just a second. Don't go anywhere. It's the Tony Kinnett Cast.
Good evening, everybody.
This is the Tony Kinnett Cast on 93 WIBC.
All right, let's talk about a little more on the quick news roundup, because while the one half of the left-leaning media was losing their ever-loving minds over the Trump administration and its multiplicity of announcements over the weekend, the other half decided to take the Newark situation and make it worse. Now, remember that the El Salvador Maryland man, the precious, wonderful father who was, the wife beater, illegal immigrant from MS-13, who, had MS-13 tattooed on his knuckles, but not the letters because that's photoshopped. How they decided to make it worse by putting all of their chips in that guy's basket. Again, little metaphor there. Well, they're doing the same thing now with good old Newark and Delaney Hall. So as a bit of a recap, the Democrat congressmen and women, Democrat Representative LaMonica McIver, Bonnie Watson Coleman, and Representative Bob Menendez, three people whose names I have to look at every single time I bring up the story because no one has ever heard of the three Democratic representatives from New Jersey. They went to Delaney Hall, an ICE facility, where illegal immigrants who are also criminals, again, not just scooping granny off the street, where they're being held. Again, remember, when it comes to refugees, only one kind matters, the stabby kind. So the Newark mayor and Democrat gubernatorial candidate Ross Baraka showed up to the ICE facility to put on a show. And I do mean to put on a show. So Representative LaMonica McIver struts up to the gate and says, "We're here to do an oversight check." And the Fed's like, "Well, according to the U.S. code, you're supposed to let us know within 24 hours of your coming so that we can prepare the area." I don't know if you guys know this, but certain kinds of lockdown might have to go in place. Maybe they check every cell to make sure nobody's hiding a shiv so that we have a former congresswoman instead of a congresswoman. Seems like safety of a congressperson might be kind of important, just throwing that one out there. We all can't, fly to El Salvador for a margarita. So McIver and Coleman and Menendez are arguing, and Ross Baraka, the mayor of Newark, who has no authority whatsoever to be there, even if he called ahead, there's no reservation at this Texas Roadhouse table. So he's basically told to go pound sand. So Ross decides he's time to put on his Hulk hands and his Mr. Potato angry eyes, and he starts charging in. And he gets arrested because, insurrection. And the other three Congress people, the two Congresswomen and Rob Menendez, son of the currently in prison Bob Menendez, who took gold bars from Egypt, well, fun fact, they also got into the fray. And then after, Baraka was arrested, the Democrats came out and cried their big crocodile tears again because, the wrong color of refugee or migrant or illegal immigrant or whatever, non-citizen, is in the facility. And also now Ross Baraka has been arrested for, trespassing and criminal mischief. Well, it turns out more footage just so happens to show what the kids would call illegal activities. I know, I too am shocked. Here is Representative LaMonica McIver throwing hands, and not only throwing hands, throwing hips, and doing a good amount of shoving, just trying to get past federal guards. That would be assault. And then also and this isn't illegal, it's just really classless, giving them the what for with every swear word she can think of. This was body camera footage released by Homeland Security. So she's getting in there in the red blazer, throwing her weight around. So, lovely stuff. Very, very lovely stuff. I have noticed, I can't help but notice this one. Since the Democrats have gone all in on the whole, we need body cameras on every cop right now, I've noticed a lot of the exchanges between cops don't exactly paint the cops as the bad guys in a lot of these situations. It's, again, the people accusing the cops of bad things that are often caught doing the reprehensible things like, committing assault. I did point out on Carl Higbee today over on Newsmax that that's the fastest and most aggressive I've ever seen a Democrat throw her hips around to move someone out of the way since J.B. Pritzker had somebody between him and the Golden Corral buffet. Excellent stuff. So that's about enough out of a discount Jasmine Crockett for a moment. Apparently, Rob Menendez, he's like doing the weird like over arm slap. That looks like Rob Menendez anyhow. I don't know what it is with the left, and whenever they go to like be a part of a protest or a riot and things get a little frisky, instead of throwing a punch, they do this weird like over arm slap. Like a really wussy kid trying to throw a baseball, but he throws, I'm sorry, the old expression is throws like a girl. So he's like, like that's the kind of punch that old Bobby Menendez looks like he's throwing here. I mean, I'm just saying, look, there you go. Little throw, little pat. All right. That's it's like Tim Walz is running the Democrats' choreography right now. I just don't know how good of an idea it is. The best part, though, is watching CNN try to bring on Coleman. Hey, producer Nick, that's the first time I remembered her name without having to look it up. Representative Coleman came on to whine and cry and say, the feds were pushing us around and I have hemorrhage in 3 places, and all sadness. And CNN plays the footage of the altercation while she's whining and seems to portray perhaps a different message.
But there's no reason for it. Nothing happened other than the chaos that they created themselves. If anything, we were pushed.
See, there you go. See, check it out. There's MacIver while she's saying we were pushed around. Here she comes like the Kool-Aid man busting in through a wall.
If anything, we were.
Yep, there's the shove and then just like belly body slam right there. Let's see it again.
If anything, we
Boom.
were pushed and shoved and found in a very vulnerable situation for the 3 of us.
Oh, for the 3 of us. Again, did you notice she doesn't say Baraka as well? Like she's already kind of like stepping away from it. This is so embarrassing every time they try to do this. And the reason to why I'm bringing this up is that now, as of today, a little developing information on this one. Now we get the Episcopalians and like the other like fake Christian denominations back out there again. Oh, I'm sorry. Did I say that out loud? So the not actually Christian denominations, the social clubs, maybe I should say, decided to get out. These are usually the people who are like LGBTQ plus 2IA 8675309 Jenny style priests and rabbis and church unity officials. They got out and they linked arms together. Play a little Red Rover, perhaps red in more ways than one. And they decided that they're going to block Delaney Hall because lest another rapist be put behind bars, that cannot happen. How dare these particular criminal illegal aliens be locked away? It's unconscionable. So here they are. I love it. It's not a Democrat protest unless there's out of tune singing. And again, you've got the granny from the co-op up there with a stop sign, and then underneath in poorly written Sharpie, deportations now. And then the girl who looks like the stunt double for Elaine on Seinfeld with immigrant and then a jaguar underneath it roaring. I don't know how well a jaguar is going to pick your cotton, given that that's all you think they're good for. Let my people stay. I love that one so much. So again, it's never anything about people in the United States that are already supposed to be here that worry them. Let my people stay. And then there's a sheet next to, a much wider stunt double for Elaine from Seinfeld than originally thought. Maybe like Elaine and Newman. Anywho, New Jersey voters say, no migrant misery. No ICE jail here. Well, on the bright side, the whole deportation thing means that they won't be here forever. So I've got good news for you. So they're protesting. And while they're doing their little protest, they're trying to block vans coming in. So again, why is it that every old white lady who's a liberal on the left, all of them look like my middle school band teacher? Every single one of them. Everyone, without fail, every one of them looks the exact same, and they're always very, very grumpy old women. And I'm just making an observation. She looks exactly like Representative Coleman. Basically, take Rachel Maddow and stick her in a microwave for like 10 minutes, and they come out looking like, and they're holding up the cardboard sign, "You shall not pass." Like if Gandalf the Grey was Gandalf the Gay. Just fantastic stuff here. So they're blocking traffic now. They're blocking official vehicles from, coming in to the facility. They're singing the Don Knotts from Andy Griffith. We shall not be moved. Oh, and it's a sign that says love. Ah, yes. So before she made it over here, she ransacked her local Michael's or Hobby Lobby to grab a love sign and blowing kisses at, the illegal immigrants in the vehicle. Ah, yes. Guy on the inside's probably coming off of his heroin trip. ¿Qué es eso? Esta abuelita holding the sign de amor. I will say that the best part of the particular protest, at least for me, was watching them get arrested.
Excuse me, where are you bringing her?
So as the lady in the headdress is being marched away, I don't know if you heard that. She said, "We're all immigrants here."
We're all immigrants here.
We're all immigrants here. Okay. No, a lot of us aren't immigrants here at all. Aren't. In fact, a lot of us we were raised here. Our parents were, in fact, raised here. And I'll go ahead and play that card as a registered member of the Cherokee tribe. Not Elizabeth Warren 1 out of 1024, but an actual member of the tribe. I'd like to point out that I don't remember any of the Native American history that I've read. Well, actually, hold on a second. Let me check here. I want to make sure. Nope. I can't find any of the books on Midwestern and East Coast Native American history that I've got over there. None of them have any of the Native Americans in Islamic headdresses. I for one, am shocked. Amazing. I don't think so. Have fun being in jail. The Department of Homeland Security has indicated that it's very likely that other arrests are on the table. And I do want to make this quite clear. McIver or whatever, Timu, Jasmine Crockett, should absolutely be arrested. She committed assault. Either no one is above the law or not. So just as far as that's concerned, this brings us over to a few of the Trump announcement pieces. Now I'm going to go ahead and pop a bubble real quick. We are not talking about the big, beautiful budget bill that the House just passed. We're not talking about that tonight. Here's why. Came out this afternoon. Thing's over 300 pages, and I haven't read it yet. And so instead of pontificating on a bill I haven't read, or B, asking AI to condense it in a way that I don't trust right before air, we're going to talk about that one tomorrow. Additionally, we're going to briefly talk about the Trump and Qatari airplane situation, but we might have more on that tomorrow that's more on the exclusive side. So I'm also not going to give the full explanation on that. There are a couple of big things that I do want to hit before we sail off on a beautiful Monday evening. First of all, if you got any rest over the weekend, it's simply because you weren't on social media watching all of the political news run out thing after thing after thing after thing after thing. So, for example, Carolyn Leavitt, the White House press secretary, did get a chance to talk briefly in kind of a summary of some of the Trump administration announcements over the weekend. And I got to say, it's quite the list.
Look, we told you the next 100 days would consist of peace deals and trade deals, and that's exactly what we have seen. The president announced last week the big trade deal with the UK, as you mentioned. Now we have a first deal with China. Just yesterday, the president announced the release of the last remaining American hostage in Gaza, Eden Alexander, who will soon be united with his loving family. God bless him. That's thanks to President Trump. We also negotiated a ceasefire with the Houthis, and President Trump was instrumental in negotiating a ceasefire with India and Pakistan. This is all in the last week. President Trump and his team are working incredibly hard on behalf of the country and the world to secure peace deals and trade deals. And don't forget, we have a tax deal coming too. The administration is working with Capitol Hill to sign the largest tax cuts in American history.
Okay, so a couple of things there that are worth talking about right away. Number one, the Hamas terror organization being so gutlessly terrified of the Trump administration letting Israel finish off Gaza that as a goodwill gesture, they release Eden Alexander, the last American hostage from their captivity. That's because they killed a lot of the other ones or let them die. But Eden Alexander being freed is a very good thing. That is, in fact, a victory. A victory that is going to be completely undercovered, and it is a shame, is the Trump administration using the strong arm of American diplomacy and its economy to get India and Pakistan to calm the bleep down. Again, an unstable Islamic nuclear power, and India, a slightly more stable, but not too hot in the northern regions of it at least, nuclear power, that those two going to war as it was escalating. We actually had to air an interview. So on Friday, we'd recorded an interview about the drone tactics between the two countries. By the evening, we were at kind of like fighter jet sorties. By about 2 a.m., we were starting to look at ballistic missile, like non-nuclear, kind of standard explosive ballistic missiles between the two countries. Things were heating up very quickly. So we actually had to change our upload schedule just because the news was getting that intense. And the Trump administration came in and said something that, again, is not going to get the credit that it deserves. This kind of foreign policy works. Here's President Trump on how the India-Pakistan ceasefire occurred.
And we helped a lot. And we helped also with trade. I said, come on, we're going to do a lot of trade with you guys. Let's stop it. Let's stop it. If you stop it, we're doing trade. If you don't stop it, we're not going to do any trade. People have never really used trade the way I used it. That I can tell you. And all of a sudden they said, I think we're going to stop. And they have. And they did it for a lot of reasons. But trade is a big one. We're going to do a lot of trade with Pakistan. We're going to do a lot of trade with India.
That is, in fact, how you actually accomplish certain things with American soft power. Now, setting aside Russia and Ukraine, which is a unique situation, the United States basically walking into a room in which there is an ongoing conflict. And it happens to be an ongoing conflict in a place where we're actually doing things. The United States does, in fact, have an interest in keeping Pakistan somewhat functional as kind of a watch post in a couple of ways. And then, of course, the United States has a major reason to support India. Of course, that's one of the reasons why Vice President Vance was over there. It should, in fact, be the bulwark against China and the core United States military ally in the region. If you take a look at a situation in which you have two countries that are starting to get a little antsy, they're starting to throw around a few missiles and bombs and things, the United States can do one of three things. The hyper-isolationist thing that Marjorie Taylor Greene and a few other members on the Republican side of the aisle seem to espouse is that the United States should just do the hear no, see no, speak no evil, like the three monkey statues, and just pretend that there's no world outside the United States and hide. Because after all, if we leave everyone else alone, they'll leave us alone because they're just like we are, which is like George Bushian foreign policy in reverse. Like it's just as dumb as nation building, but it's isolationism to the extreme. Again, it's not regular isolationism, it's this hyper isolationism. Number two, you can do the Joe Biden, Barack Obama, kind of George Bush. Hey guys, you just want to kind of calm down a little bit. We'll give you money. And actually, have you thought about hanging a pride flag from your embassy? We'll give you lots of money. And then they end up fighting anyway, and terrorists end up with a lot of U.S. military equipment and money. So that's option number two. Or option number three is you have Marco Rubio walk into a room, an angry Cuban man who puts his drink down, unlike, Macron doesn't exactly set the bag of cocaine down. You have Marco Rubio lean forward and go, okay, listen to me. If you don't stop this right now, you're going to be broke. You're going to be dead. You're going to be very dead and very broke. Going to be no money for your funeral. And then, amazingly, as it happened in Panama, and as it just happened with India and Pakistan, both countries are like, oh my God, you mean it. You mean it. Again, the reason that Putin didn't invade Ukraine while Trump was in office the first time is because, and this has been relayed quite a number of times, a story that Trump loves to tell, when Putin had no idea if Trump would just fire a nuke at Russia. He had no idea that deterrent works because, as Teddy Roosevelt made very clear, speak softly and carry a big stick. It does not mean be quiet and carry a big stick. If you really want to get people to listen, whether it's students, whether it's children, sometimes a low, menacing voice is in fact the best way to get across the demands of the most powerful country on the face of the earth. There's nothing wrong with the United States walking up to two countries and going, hey, my citizens want something out of this. Cough it up. And China said no. And so the United States said, okay, what if we crashed your entire economy that we built for you? That was the US-China trade war. We'll talk about that in a little more detail here in a couple of days as some of the tariff deals and policies play out. There is nothing wrong with American hegemony if it is done correctly. If it's done in a wimpy world building, come on, everyone, let's have love and hugs and every culture is just the same. As again, George W. Bush said, in the heart of everyone is a young, full of liberty, like yearning to breathe free. Like, I don't know what in the world he was on when he said that, but he was wrong. And that kind of Nikki Haley-esque foreign policy, where you think you can just nation build anywhere, is in fact not useful. But if the United States goes up to India, to Pakistan, to the Houthis, and says, stop fighting, or in the case of the Houthis, stop shooting our boats, and stop shooting the boats of people who have goods that the American people are buying or selling, because that's in the direct interest of this country. And if the Houthis, for example, say, no, just because you're friends with Israel, we're going to shoot all the ships in the Red Sea so that no one goes through here anymore. Then Trump said, okay, what if you didn't exist anymore? And the Trump administration and the Israeli administration, likely with the granted permission of the United States, bombed the crap out of the Houthis. And the Houthis said, please don't bomb us anymore, at least according to the Trump administration. And now there's a ceasefire in place because Trump said, okay, do what we want or you won't be here anymore. Now, unfortunately, Marjorie Taylor Greene, who I believe a lot of the time has a lot of great things to say, who I think a lot of the time has her heart in the right place and does a really great job in many ways for her constituents in Georgia. On some things, I am of the opinion, I think a lot of people are of the opinion, that just because you're in the House of Representatives doesn't mean you need to talk all the time about everything. And sometimes there are times when it may make a lot of sense in your head to say something, but the minute it comes out of your mouth, no, not an intelligent thing. Marjorie Taylor Greene made a statement about the Houthis recently that I don't think was perhaps the best move one could make, but it is worth talking about here when we're discussing U.S. foreign policy and the difference between doing it right and being weak and pathetic. Here's Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene.
I don't think we should be fighting wars on behalf of Israel, and many Americans agree with that. I'm one of those Americans that are really sick and tired of the narrative that we're constantly told that we're supposed to hate some country that's overseas that maybe we've never been to. We don't know anything about that country, but we're told that they're the greatest threat to our freedoms and our democracy, and that we have to go to war with them. I've never seen a Houthi or a Houthi, or however you pronounce it. I don't even know what they look like. I haven't seen them back home in Rome, Georgia, where I live. I haven't seen them in Washington, D.C. And I keep saying that, how is this a threat to everyday Americans?
Okay. I wanted to play that in its entirety so that, no one could accuse us of going out of context here. I hate posts like this, not because of her opinion. You don't want to give foreign aid to anybody. You don't want to be involved in international policy or politics. Cool. If you're an isolationist, okay, there are some good arguments for U.S. isolation and the U.S. uninvolvement, the U.S. distancing from particular political conflicts. Absolutely. That's fine. The issue that I have is an issue that I take with the left and a lot of kind of populist style politics, where everything is immediately hyperbolic and everything immediately frames the opponent's argument as this goofy-footed evil straw man. And so we're going to talk about this because Marjorie Taylor Greene is a very likely candidate to run for the Senate in Georgia. And if she runs against Ossoff, she will lose. And she will lose because she does things like this. It's important because I don't want Ossoff to win in Georgia. By the way, there are a lot of populists on the right that I think would be phenomenal as a Senate candidate in Georgia. Marjorie Taylor's not one of them. We have to go through this because it matters how we talk about these conflicts, because there's a right way to discuss the isolationism side as well, and this ain't it. So
I don't think we should be fighting wars on behalf of Israel.
Okay, no one that I have spoken to, all the way over to the Lindsey Grahamist of Bomb Iran, all the way over to the Lindsey Grahamist of neocons, of Bushian Republicans. No one is suggesting that we go to war on behalf of Israel. And if you mean go to war on behalf of Israel, what do you mean? What do you mean? Who's calling for boots on the ground and occupation? Where? Show me this person. And if there was a person that said we needed boots on the ground to occupy some country that isn't Mexico, like the United States has done twice in history, who is this person? I'll make fun of him with you. I have not found this person who says we need to go to war on behalf of Israel. Marjorie Taylor Greene has announced that she's not running for the Senate in Georgia. Oh well, good. I'm glad that she made that decision. So, Marjorie Taylor Greene.
And many Americans agree with that.
Okay. So she's making the case that she's a representative, and many Americans agree with this position that we should not be going to war with other people, for Israel. Again, you're fighting a ghost. You're shadow boxing. It's like, again, when at the beginning, the guy's saying, well, I won't, condemn the murder of white people because that would sympathize with white supremacists. What white supremacists are you talking about? And it doesn't stop here, because now she's going to shift slightly and it's going to get worse.
I'm one of those Americans that are really sick and tired of the narrative that we're constantly told that we're supposed to hate some country that's overseas that maybe we've never been to.
Okay. First of all, I am looking for the people who are telling you to just blindly hate countries. I'm looking for them. There are people who advocate that we should not like or support certain countries. There are. And there are many good reasons for why someone might tell you, hey, I'm a refugee from communist China. China is the worst. We should hate China. We should hate, just to pick random places like Myanmar, Cambodia. We should despise Venezuela. We should despise, that's a thing. That's been a thing for a long time. That's totally fine. There's no issue with that. But she's making the case, well, we've been told, like she's describing Narnia, this far off mystical place that we've never heard of and we've never interacted with, like way out there. Where is this country? Where is this country? Houthis have, in fact, killed Americans. Houthis have, in fact, jeopardized the American economy. And I'm not talking about the American economy of the super rich and wealthy elite. I mean the people in this country who are small business owners, medium-sized business owners who do some importing and exporting and like to have things not cost $500 million to not ship through the Red Sea. Those are her constituents who in fact matter. So like, again, this far away, oh, we have to hate this far off country. Well, what is the far off country doing, Marjorie? Tell me about the far off country. What do they believe? What do they say? And now she's going to make the case that, well, shit, the Houthis are a non-entity. I don't even know who they are. I don't even know who they look like.
We don't know anything about that country, but we're told that they're the greatest threat to our freedoms and our democracy, and that we have to go to war with them. I've never seen a Houthi or a Houthi, or however you pronounce it.
Okay, this is retarded. This is retarded. You are a Congresswoman of the United States of America. Your job is to partially vote for and against treaties. You are to take part in international politics as a body. That is your job. Some of your constituents are veterans. Some of your constituents work at insurance companies who have to insure boats who travel abroad. Some of the people who are your constituents are merchant marines and sailors. Some of your constituents work in factories that depend on goods being shipped through the Red Sea without being blown apart like Muslim pirates. I don't understand why Thomas Jefferson understood this, but she can't get it. This isn't difficult. You don't have to, draw up some magical 500-year history like, this is why the Russians hate the Ukrainians. It's all because in 1354, Saint Ugoslavy the Bubadev decided that he didn't like tree stumps in Kiev. You don't have to do that. Muslim piracy and the Americans' destroying of it is one of our country's oldest traditions. Don't touch our boats. But again, she's trying to make this case that the alternative to throwing a bomb on a Houthi camp is like some endless Iraq or Afghanistan war. And that's not the case.
I've never seen a Houthi or a Houthi, or however you pronounce it. I don't even know what they look like. I haven't seen them back home in Rome, Georgia, where I live. I haven't seen them in Washington, D.C. And I keep saying that, how is this a threat to everyday Americans?
Okay, that's the last thing. How is this? So this is the isolationist argument that if we just leave the Islamic terror groups that are shooting us, our allies, and also those who, and I don't just mean allies militarily, because it actually has very little to do with Israel. When the Houthis shoot English boats and French boats and German boats and boats which are out on the waters from the external shipping operations of countries that we're friendly with in Africa or from India, and they shoot those boats because they're going through the canal at the end of the Red Sea, it turns out that directly impacts everyday Americans. I don't even know what a Houthi looks like. Oh my God. Okay, well, then you shouldn't be in Congress. If you don't know one of the 5 primary groups that are currently attacking U.S. shipping and trade, and you are so foolish that you are unable to discern why throwing a bomb on a group firing guns and missiles and rockets at your ships doesn't mean, you can't figure out why that doesn't mean you have to have an eternal war, then you shouldn't be in Congress. I'm sorry. That's a poor isolationist argument. It has been before, and it continues to be. If someone touches our boats, again, this also goes to the idea that, well, if we fire a missile or a bomb, it could kill children. That is not the responsibility of the party gaining retribution. This is what the whole Israeli-Gaza situation with Hamas has been very foolishly misconstrued as. If I go and commit a crime as a father and a husband, and then deciding that I don't like the government going after me for committing that crime, I then run home and hold my family hostage, and my family gets killed in the process, that's on me, not law enforcement. This idea that well, yeah, I mean, he, shot a bunch of weapons out of his house, but I mean, his wife and his kids are there. What are we going to do? He shouldn't have shot the weapon with his wife and his kids in the home. It's not on you, it's on him. I don't understand why on earth we're doing these moral acrobatics to suggest that the United States is culpable for everything and every woe in the world, but no one else is. Oh, the Israeli and the Jews are responsible for all of this and whatever, but no one else is. No. Everyone has agency, and if you make decisions, you are responsible for those decisions. The United States does not owe it to other countries to dig into secret, complex abacus situations. And with that particular note out over the way, yeah, Excellent. Marjorie is confirmed not running for the Senate. Good. That's fantastic news. Again, a lot of great arguments indeed for isolationism. And I guarantee you, we will talk more about the Qatari situation a little bit in the next episode, as well as the poor reporting on it, and what's good about it, what's bad. Not to mention the U.S. House budget and what that contains, and salt and all other goodness. We'll be back tomorrow with more of it. Thank you very much for tuning in. It's the Tony Kinnett Cast here on the Daily Signal.